Hello, I'm Geraldine and these are my novel opinions. This is going to be a roundup of all the books that I read in January 2026. And the first book I read, which I actually started last year but finished a couple of days into January, is Careless People, a story of where I used to work by Sarah Wynn-Williams. It's a kind of memoir of one woman's experience of working at Facebook, I think before it became Meta. Although no one individual episode in this is particularly surprising, when they're all gathered together in one place, they paint a very scary picture. And I think the thing that I was most surprised about it was how chaotic Facebook was up until fairly recently, and that's when it started becoming just a project in megalomania. Some critics have said that she very much downplays how complicit she was herself in a lot of this, and I think that's probably true, but I don't think that detracts from the message from it at all. I came off, or at least I stopped using any social media owned by evil billionaires about a year ago, but reading this made me actually delete it from my devices, so I couldn't be tempted to go back for any reason. The next book I read was The Green Ages by Annette Kehnel, I think it's pronounced, and it's translated by Gesche Ipsen, not on the cover though. My husband bought me this for Christmas. And I hadn't heard of it before, but it sounded quite interesting. It's billed as how we can learn from medieval forms of sustainability and apply them to the modern day. But it didn't really turn out to be that. It starts off with a passage about economics and how capitalism isn't inevitable. And then it becomes just a collection of long essays about various things, ways of doing things in the Middle Ages, which are fairly interesting in themselves for the most part, just for the history of them. But they don't really amount to anything that is convincingly applicable to the modern day. And it came across really as just a bit of a confused mishmash of ideas. So I was quite keen on this when I first read the blurb on the back, but sadly it didn't live up to its promise. After that, I read Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. This is the story of the death of Abraham Lincoln's son as a young boy, and how he's living in the Bardo, which is a kind of purgatory between the living world and the afterlife. It's very good at conveying the grief that Lincoln feels at the death of his son, and also how he juxtaposes that with how he is at the same time sending thousands of other sons off to their possible deaths in the Civil War, and how he rationalises that, which is quite an interesting twist on it, because he does rationalise it. It's written in a very odd style of short conversational snippets and historical documents, and sometimes this works very well and other times less so, so I had rather mixed feelings about it. It also had a vast cast of characters which I had trouble keeping up with at times, and sometimes I wasn't entirely sure what was going on. So I think for the most part I enjoyed it, but it won't make me rush to read his new book that's just come out. Next, I moved on to Abide With Me by Elizabeth Strout. This is the story of a young minister in a small town in America who has recently been widowed, and his young daughter who has some behavioural issues, probably caused by the loss of her mother. All of this starts gossip amongst the townspeople, who never really liked the minister's wife anyway, and the gossip just snowballs and snowballs. This was the only Strout I hadn't read. This is the last one of her books that I've read, and so far it's been my least favourite. Although it does have her absolute brilliance at portraying ordinary people and describing their the terrible tragedies in their lives, but in a very quiet way, so quiet that you could almost miss them if you weren't careful. But this book also has some very long, rambling passages that I didn't particularly get on with. The characters didn't have the charm of her later books, which I found a little bit disappointing. Plus, I found the resolution a little bit unlikely. But nevertheless, I know that she moved on to even better things after this. And I am very much looking forward to her new book that comes out later this year. Finally, in January, I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This is a classic haunted house story. It's about 4 unconnected people who go to study the hauntings that are going on in a house that has a reputation for having ghosts. I had this on reserve with my library, the ebook copy, and I first put a reserve on it in October, and there was such a long waiting list that it still wasn't ready by Christmas when I intended to read it. But then I discovered it was on my Kindle all along. I think my husband must have bought it at some point because we share a Kindle library and I'd certainly never bought it before. But anyway, hey ho, I got it for free essentially. It takes a very long time for any spooky happenings to occur, but even up until that point, it's very good at creating a creepy atmosphere. And when the spooky goings on do start, it is genuinely creepy and scary, even after all this time. It's got quite a lot of tropes which in the meantime have become a little bit well worn, but they still seem fresh in this context, so that shouldn't put you off at all. There were times when I wasn't sure what was actually going on and what was just imagined by one of the characters, but that actually added to it rather than detracted from it for me. So yes, definitely highly recommended. That's all I read in January. At the end of January, I started reading She's a Lamb. So that will be the first book that I review in my February roundup. So I look forward to seeing you then. Bye.